Welcome to Blessed Man Meditations. My name is Andy. On this YouTube channel, I offer thoughtful responses to skeptical objections to the Christian faith. I likewise edify the saints by equipping them to provide an answer for the hope that lies within them. I hope that you find value in my work. Please like my videos, send me comments, and please subscribe. Let's work together to contend earnestly for the faith that's been once for all delivered to the saints. Welcome to Blessed Man Meditations. This is where we provide answers to the intellectual side of Christianity and equip Christians to provide a defense for the hope that is in them. According to 1 Peter 3:15, today we begin our look at Eric Metaxas' book, Is Atheism Dead? Eric Metaxas, for those who don't know, is a New York Times best-selling author. He's written for The New Yorker, The Atlantic, and The Wall Street Journal. On this slide is included a link to an article that Metaxas wrote about Christianity being confirmed by science, and that is a large portion of this book that we're going to begin looking at today, Is Atheism Dead? Part 1 of Atheism, Is Atheism Dead by Eric Metaxas, has to do with whether or not science points to God. On this video, we will deal with the introduction of Is Atheism Dead? And that is entitled The Grand Counter-Narrative. Metaxas begins his introduction to Is Atheism Dead by asserting that we live in exciting times because there is inescapable evidence for God's existence that is being discovered. Metaxas says that much of our culture has not acknowledged much of the evidence that has been discovered. He says there was a Time magazine cover in 1966 that asked the question, is God dead? Since that time, most have accepted the contention that God is indeed dead. They have tried, much of society at large has tried to, at least American society has tried to shut him out so that they would not believe that he's there, not sense that he is there. America's secular leaders would not, and most still do not, seriously engage the evidence for God's existence. Rather, America's secular leaders did and continue to ignore it, just like many in today's contemporary society ignore it, because many in today's secular society do not want to be awakened from their secular slumber. Since 1966, however, while the majority has continued to ride the wave of secularism, a change has taken place that has largely gone unnoticed. Secularists, like that, secularists enjoy that it has gone unnoticed because the change toward theism that secularists ignore and hope others miss. As long as they keep ignoring it, it allows them to continue to be the loudest voices in the room, and that is what the non-theistic scientific community, the non-theistic majority, continues to do. They continue to be the loudest voices in the room. In 2015, Eric Metaxas published a book entitled Miracles. In that book, Miracles, Metaxas talked about the scientific evidence for God, about the fine-tuning argument. There's a portion of this book, Is Atheism Dead?, that deals with the fine-tuning argument. This led to an article that Metaxas was able to publish in the Wall Street Journal, and the article is entitled Science Increasingly Makes the Case for God, and there's a link to that article. This article, written by Metaxas, got shared, Metaxas claims, more than any other article ever published in the Wall Street Journal. The popularity of his article demonstrated to Metaxas that people were hungry for the answers to the big questions. Questions such as, is there a God? If there is a God, can we know that there is a God rationally? What does science have to say about God? These are the big questions. Metaxas says that good answers to these questions often elude us. And his article that got published in the Wall Street Journal addressed these questions. Metaxas says that he wrote this book that we're going through today, that we're beginning today, is Atheism Dead, because of the response that he received to that Wall Street Journal article. He says that the evidence for God's existence has come in slowly, and this evidence is increased as the decades have gone by. People who were opposed to God failed to appreciate this evidence as it came in. People who did not oppose God did not realize that the evidence for God was coming in. Even though they believed in this God, they didn't realize the evidence was coming in to corroborate their belief. Metaxas says that the evidence has reached such a crescendo that he had to put much of the evidence that was coming in this book that we're going to begin today, is Atheism Dead. Much of the evidence that Metaxas will cite in this book, Is Atheism Dead, has been cited elsewhere, in other people's works, and in other videos, even on this very YouTube channel. Some of the evidence includes the Big Bang. The Big Bang was settled once and for all. The Big Bang once and for all has settled whether or not the universe has always existed or didn't always exist. The Big Bang settled once and for all whether the universe always existed or did not always exist. The question of whether or not the universe is eternal or whether it had a beginning. In discovering that the universe had a beginning, we learned that there was a point at which all of the laws of physics and of all matter and energy did not exist. One corollary to this is that we know now not just that the universe began, but when it began, and therefore we know the age of the universe. Before we knew the age of the universe, we could always say the emergence of life out of non-life had an infinite amount of time to happen, and theoretically, given infinity, anything could happen. But suddenly, that infinity shrank to 13.8 billion years, and there was no longer forever for life to emerge. In addition to the Big Bang, we have the fine-tuning, which has, again, been discussed on this channel. Fine-tuning was already observed in 1950, but things didn't begin to look seriously troubling for atheists until about the 1990s. Since the 1990s, because of scientific advances, we can look much more closely at the nature of things and can see more clearly than ever that things in our universe and on this earth could not have emerged by chance, as we once so easily believed. Next, the evidence includes abiogenesis, a field that you hear a lot from Jim Tor on. And abiogenesis, for those who don't know, refers to the study of how life emerged from non-life. The more closely we can example cells, the more we can see how stupefyingly complex they are. The more closely we can examine cells, the more closely we look at them, the more we see how complex they are. And if they are more complex, it is less and less likely that life came by random processes. We once thought that cells were very simple and could have randomly assembled in the primordial soup. Fourth, we have archaeology, Middle Eastern archaeological discoveries. Discoveries made with alarming frequency continue to corroborate the Bible as being historically accurate, but yet much of the secular world ignores these things. This trend of Middle Eastern archaeological discoveries began in the mid-19th century and has accelerated in the last decades. The volume of artifacts currently available make it impossible for any serious person to continue to regard the Bible as a collection of folk tales. It's becoming less and less plausible to hold the view that the Bible is a collection of folk tales because there has been so much archaeological evidence pouring in to corroborate many of the stories. Next, our knowledge of atheism, theoretically and practically. We've had time to observe the lives of various atheists, such as Jean-Paul Sartre, Albert Camus, and Anthony Flew, to see whether they could live out their philosophies in a way that was inspiring or was even merely logical. We've had the opportunity to see which of them most honestly grappled with the eternal question of God's existence and what they eventually came to believe. We've also had the opportunity to watch the decades-long careers of atheist states like the former Soviet Union, atheist states like China, Nazi Germany, North Korea, and we've seen the inhuman horrors attending the atheistic worldview, so that anyone with any respect for human rights or freedom must conclude that state-sponsored and enforced atheism must rank as the most wicked form of oppression in human history. Of course, in Is God a Moral Monster by Paul Copan, new atheists would make claims like that about Christian theism, but we answered those objections at length in Is God a Moral Monster by Paul Copan. So now we see that atheism, not Christianity, it must rank as the most wicked form of oppression in human history, which must say something about those nations and about atheism in general as well. Metaxas says that in his book he set the bar rather low. Metaxas does not expect to convince anyone beyond the larger point that the belief that there is no God has, at least in recent decades, become untenable. The belief that no God exists has become untenable. The topics addressed by Metaxas in this book, Is Atheism Dead, will be limited to the scope of atheism. Atheism declares that there is no God, and it claims that this position that there is no God is rational. But atheism does not attempt to do much beyond convincing people of this idea. Metaxas may not be able to convince readers or listeners of specific details of the Bible or the truth of some of the doctrines of the faith. Metaxas hopes and expects to convince any rational person that atheism is no longer an option for those wishing to be regarded as intellectually honest. We may all have excellent questions and may doubt many things, and may even be hostile to many expressions of faith, and might reasonably call ourselves agnostics. But the idea that anyone can at this juncture say they believe there is no God, much less know that there is no God, must henceforth be regarded as willful unreason or as mere affectation, or perhaps both. But Metaxas hopes that this will become self-evident to the reader in due course. So that concludes the introduction to Is Atheism Dead? Next time, we will look at Chapter 1, where we see that in the beginning was the Big Bang. So thank you for tuning in to Blessed Man Meditations today. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Please consider supporting this ministry, Blessed Man Meditations, by purchasing the published work, Pinnacles and Plateaus, Meditations with the Psalmist, the volume on the first 30 chapters of the Book of Psalms. Thank you for your prayers, and I hope you have a blessed rest of your day.